was. We're gonna talk about the beginning of when I started appraising was a long time ago, before some of you were born. In the 1970s, I worked with Sotheby's. I happened to stop at a Sotheby's office and meet the little lady who worked there part-time, loved me, and you know, we had some friends in common. So I was able to get a relationship in Palm Beach with Sotheby's in the 70s. Well, that was before I was ASA or ISA. So I was just trying to figure out how this works. I was a specialist in Oriental rugs, but I also did silver. I have a chemistry background, and anything that you can analyze like that, I'm good at. So I started working with Sotheby's. The good thing was they immediately started sending me business. So I never thought about a finder's fee, a commission, any of that stuff, because nobody ever talked to me about it. I didn't know it existed. I don't know still if it maybe didn't exist in the 70s. But I remember the consignment sheet was like simple. It was like not even a full page. It was just real basic. Now they're really a lot of pages. But I just did it. I felt like I was getting a fair shake. I was referring people that were appropriate, that needed to have, they didn't know how to approach Christie's or Sotheby's. And I worked with Sotheby's almost exclusively at the national level or international level, and you know, a few local auctions. So, so there wasn't any ethics because I didn't take a fee. I made sure that I was doing the best I could for my clients. So that was, you know, the early period. The next, and during the course of my relationship with Sotheby's, one year they sold $23 million worth of items from one estate that I referred to.
Wow.
No commission?
I didn't think it was ethical. Was involved in the estate appraisal. They offered what? What I ended up doing is I used to pay a couple $1,000s to get auction catalogs from Sotheby's, Oriental rugs, silver, golf, anything weird. And so I said, well, maybe you can send me the catalogs, you know, for a while. Well, I thought they were just going to send the ones I'd been paying for. I got every single catalog that Sotheby's made. I had to tip my postman very well because every week he was bringing heavy catalogs, and I found out it was like $8,000 worth, and they did that for a couple of years. And so, in a sense, that was my commission. But you know, that's what my relation was. I then joined ISA and ASA in the mid '80s, 1984, and I took some classes for ISA. ASA at that time didn't have any courses for personal property. You just took an 8-hour essay exam. It was tough. Passed it, but it was a long day. And then submitted your appraisals for approval, and you had to be interviewed by the local chapter and recommended. And all that worked, so I became a senior ASA in 1985. At that point, I also took ISA classes. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh, there's ethics involved in some of this stuff. I never knew about it, I never thought about it. But basically in those days they kind of scared you and said, you know, you should be very careful that you don't get kickbacks and you don't get money back from any of these things. So I still pretty much didn't get involved with commissions. I was getting, you know, referrals from the companies. So one of the appraisals that I did with those types of circumstances was one that I'm going to pass around. This is the magnificent automobiles, et cetera, from the estate of Rick Carroll. Now, this is the time when, Donna, can you start that over there? Thank you. This is for you guys. It's almost all cars. It was a huge collection. This is the one that was over $23 million that's going to be sold. So why I'm starting with that and talking about it now is I can talk about that and the other two, and I'll pass the other calendar, because I have permission. Confidentiality is very important, and it's tricky with auctions. With fellow appraisers, you know, it's like you might say, well, I think so-and-so might be able to help you, etc., and you kind of keep it, you know, quiet, or you might guess whose collection it is. But once you turn it over to an auction house, even though you say, please keep this confidential until you have a contract, so they agree that you can mention their name, there's a lot of people that don't understand what our training is about confidentiality. So that can be, you know, something to be concerned with. I have permission from all of these estates to talk about them in any detail that I want. That one was done in the 1990, and it was it was very interesting. It was held at the Breakers. It was the first automobile auction that Sotheby's did in the States. They brought the guys over from London. I was doing the estate, and I had built a relationship with a gentleman called Bill Ruprecht. And he started in the Oriental Rug Department at Sotheby's about the same time I started going. He retired, 2 years ago, from being president and CEO of Sotheby's. He kind of went up the ladder. But he started, I knew him and we were buddies, and he used to tease me about we're the only non-Middle Eastern people in the rug field. That woman in Florida and that guy in New York, because it was pretty true in those days, in the 80s. So I had a problem with the estate. They asked me about, finding somebody for the cars, and I'm like, oh, I'll try, but it's not anything I know anything about. So ended up calling somebody at Sotheby's who didn't get back to me, and so if that didn't work, I always just called Bill and said, Bill, I need some help. I've got 57 jukeboxes to do, and I can't use the one guy down here because the family is pissed at him. He came to the hospital and tried to buy them back as the guy was dying. And so they don't want anything to do with him. So I said, can you help me? He said, well, what is this? And I said, well, it's a South Florida estate. And he says, does it have a lot of cars? And I said, why? And he says, we've been trying to get in to see that estate. I said, well, can you help me with the jukeboxes? He said, how many people do you want me to fly down? So he came with some other people to help with the jukeboxes and met the attorneys and talked to the family. Ended up, making a big deal. One of the things was because that's a single owner catalog auction, so the catalog, that is something that can be very important to families. They like the idea that the person who has passed away, particularly a collector, is going to be remembered in this kind of a book. So that was part of my background, was working with auction companies. For the most part, it's been very pleasant. Now we're moving into the next period when I had an estate in Fort Lauderdale that had Donna, can you pass these three around? That had the mixture of things. And they had a wonderful English piece with a huge ship with enameled sails, and it was made for the DuPont family. It had all kinds of documentation. It was from the 20s. And I was asked to appraise it. I did everything else. I said, I know this maker. I could appraise it if it was this big, but I can't appraise this because there's no comps. I don't know what to do. May I call in my colleague at Sotheby's, to look at pictures or to help me? No, we don't like Sotheby's. They cheated our uncle. Don't you dare talk to Sotheby's about anything. No problem. How about Christie's? So ended up calling Christie's, sent pictures. They got on a plane. They came down. Mr. Hartop, who's the head of the silver department, just loved the piece and the documentation. This is when it was just starting to become very important for provenance. To have the history, where the scene came from. And so the piece ended up going. The woman had had a couple of strokes. She ended up passing away the next year, and the family was doing this appraisal because they were having to make decisions. The piece went up at auction 2 years later after he came down. Did they call me? Did they send me a check? No, and it had been discussed in front of the family that there would be an introductory fee, and I said, if it's all right with the family, you're not here because of that. They didn't want Sotheby's, you're here because of that. And it was a logical place for it to sell at. A major auction house with an auction in London also. So that ended up going to auction. At the time, it was the most expensive piece of 20th century silver sold at auction. Sold for about a little over $150,000. Now that same maker's similar piece without as much documentation is sold in 2014 for $500,000. So it's changed the market. But I was excited. I had to call Mr. Christopher Hartop up and said, remember me? I picked you up at the airport in Fort Lauderdale to pick up the Omar Ramsden piece. Oh yeah. I said, we discussed an introductory fee. He said, oh, did we? I don't remember that. And I'm bringing that up because I want you to think about it. What if he wasn't even there anymore? What if it's new people? when you do have a real estate, you're doing an estate appraisal, the family's saying, you know, we know these are valuable paintings, we don't know what to do. You're meeting the people, you know, that will be coming up talking, you'll have their cards. You can, you know, say, I might have some referrals for you. I usually try to give at least 2 referrals, not 1. And what I tell people is, you could whip out your phone. Oh, I've got April's number. Oh yeah, she's local. She'll come up and take pictures. Okay. I don't do that. I go back, let me check for you, make sure I can get you the right number and the right people. And I go and I get an email. And I put the thing together with an email. I've taken pictures, I send it to them, and then I say, you know, if you want, I can forward this also to the auction house, or you can, I send it for you, you know, it's a 30 by 40 inch painting by Smith, in good condition except for a minor chip on the frame. You know, you can do it or I can do it, but there's a record. And that's important. I mean, it sounds silly, it maybe sounds selfish. If you do end up working with that client with an auction company, you're going to earn it. You're going to be getting all their calls. I haven't heard from them. Why aren't they answering me back? Do I get a catalog? What about if they damage it? You're going to have to be the in-between person. So, you know, it might be a few dollars, it might be a few $1,000s. It's not like that's all you do. If you want to not get involved, just give them the phone number. You know, just get on their computer, look it up. Say, well, you might try these people. But if you're going to build a relationship, at this point, I'll tell you, where's John King? Is he here? Back here. You can't see me. He's hiding. He used to work with Bottoms. He's now April's working with this here to represent Bottoms. I worked with him for the last few years. I've gotten over $10,000 a year from Bottoms in referral fees. I've worked with Tooney. This year I've gotten over $12,000 so far with working for the next auction that we're going to be talking about. So, you know, I'm not talking 50 or 5. Well, I put a check up on the bulletin board in the back, so when you're leaving and you're getting things, it's for $5. I just got it. It's for this auction that happened last November. And they had some things left over, and they sold something, and so they sent me my commission. So, you know, that does happen. Okay. Send these two around. Okay. You want me to stop already? Okay. A little bit more, and then we'll introduce the panel.
You're very good. You're very good.
Thank you. Now, I know you all are going to get a good meal, but I know it's you know, I don't want to waste your time. So we're all professionals. We work hard at what we do. We have the connections that other people don't have. So that's what we're doing today. We're networking and we're learning. You know, that you can help your clients in some of this type of thing. So okay, so we've gotten as far as setting the background. My experience with the auction houses. In 2017, I was asked to do an estate appraisal by an attorney that I've done a lot of work for 30-some years. And he only does large taxable estates with trust and all, so it's always complicated. Jack will call me and I say, okay, what's the tricky part about this one? He'll say, well, there's 2 legitimate kids and there's stepkids and then there's a girlfriend and her child, and it's complicated. I said, okay, just so you know, I know, and is there anybody that isn't allowed when I'm there that will try to get into the house? But I got called to do it. He said it's a trust, there's donations, there's a couple of residents. So we talked to the attorneys, they looked at my credentials and all, they hired me. It ended up, we did 5 different appraisals for various reasons, but the 2 residents we did as one. There was a large collection of studio art glass that's being passed around the catalog. This person's name was known in the glass collecting field, temporary studio glass collecting field. The family was very protective about letting it out the estate. You know, they didn't want the name of the estate mentioned. I was working on it and knowing that I was going to need some help from some auction companies. I was at an ISA conference. I talked to Meredith. We tried to get together and to work. I had another gentleman that works closely with ASA, Jackson, he's in a Midwest company, does great with glass. Not so much contemporary glass, but he's known as, you know, he can get the best prices for antique glass. He was there, I dealt with him with clients, particularly for guns. I don't do guns, I have my gun expert here, Pat Regis, but I've also referred people to him and they've been happy with his work. So I talked to him. I talked to 5 auction companies for this estate, with the attorneys and the family and everybody putting their 2 cents in. They wanted me to handle gathering the information, what kind of commissions, things like that. And they didn't want anybody bothering the family or the attorneys, and they didn't want the name known. Well, I talked to Mr. Jackson, and he would not continue to be involved. He said, "I'll fly down. I'll do it all. I'll help you with the appraisal. But I need to have the name." And I said, "I can't give it to you." The family said no. The other people I worked with, like Meredith, didn't push for the name. I sent pictures and listed information to see if that was something they would be interested in. I worked on this one with John King. He came on site because he was local at the time and took his own pictures, did his own work. I really thought that he was going to probably end up getting the collection. When he went back to his headquarters in New York, they said, "We only want the best pieces." There was a lot of pieces in there. If you look at the back of that catalog, you'll see a lot of teapots. Nobody wanted the teapots. One of the teapots sold for $5,000. These are, very arty teapots. You wouldn't drink tea out of them. They wouldn't even hold tea in most cases. So the gist of it is, Bottoms didn't get it because they only wanted the top end. Palm Beach Modern wanted only anything over $2,000. It ended up going to a Chicago auction company called Toomey Treadway. I had known Don Treadway for 30 or 40 years. He comes in the area and does the big antique shows, and he likes Oriental rugs, so I knew him from that area too. So it was interesting because they gave a presentation where they would take everything, would have a single owner catalog, so the name Joe Back's catalog is on. They had it a week before. They had preview for the auction a week before a major studio glass show in Chicago called SOFA. They had parties for it, come see the collection. They did very well for the family, for the collection. Of the commissions, and this is where the ethics come in too, I was helping everyone decide. I was pushing certain. I said, if you send just the best stuff, you might get as much or more than when you're sending all of this stuff to a lower auction house. They had a need to get everything out because they wanted to put the $4 million condo on the market. And you don't want this fragile glass that's very expensive, the Chihuly type of glass, there while you're having realtors showing the place. So it was a time crunch. So it ended up, I could have earned 25% from the hammer price from one of the auction houses, on down, mostly 10%. Toomey Treadway paid me 2% of the hammer price. Now, I have my contract. I have my contract with them. My agreement is 1 sentence, and I put it up in the back there on the bulletin board. And it was interesting, the way that worked. So I got a nice check and all. I did a lot of work for it. I have a picture there of files. We had lots of files for the artist. The owner of the collection, Joan, had a personal relationship with a lot of these artists. She had photographs with them in the piece. She had letters. She had instructions on how to set it up. So we had files set up that we had gone through the whole penthouse, double penthouse, collected all these papers everywhere, organized them by artists. We had 3 file boxes, and we talked the family into letting those go to the auction company to be kept with the pieces. So in the future, there's an invoice, there's a picture of it, provenance. And I was proud of that, because I wish it was done more often when I come in to do appraisal and someone's bought something. But that's basically, some of my experience, and what we're going to be, thinking about is, the ethics of it is you have to do what's best for your client. You need to be involved if you want to be fair about taking an introductory commission. And at this time, I'd like to have our panelists come up front, and they're gonna introduce their auction house, and then they're gonna answer questions, mine or yours. Okay, Chris, Meredith, where's April? There we go. Okay. April, here, Chris. We're really fortunate. Some of these people flew in from Dallas, Texas. Some of the people, we have international, national, and local. So that, and they all have a different way of looking at things, a different way of working, but you have a chance to have a relationship, to hear these people, and hopefully in the future, work with them. So I'd like to introduce April, who is a former ISA, and has been very involved with our chapter, has recently gone to work for Bonhams. She's worked for other auction companies and is representing the international, because Bonhams has auctions all over the world. You want to stand up?
Oh, sure.
That was smart.
Get that on the
And you got that on tape, right?
Of course.
It's on video. It'll be on Facebook tomorrow.
So thank you, Sharon. Thank you very much. I am thrilled to be here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is April Montagne, and I have been working as an independent appraiser, but also primarily in the auction business for about 25 years. And so this evening I am representing an international auction house, which is Bonhams. I am the Florida representative for Bonhams, with an office in Miami. Bonhams was founded 225 years ago, 1793 in London. Last year we had over 400 auctions in about 60 different specialty areas. And so as I'm open to answer any of your questions as we go along, but as this sort of pertains to this meeting, why we might go with an international auction house, one of the things that Bonhams is really known for is our bespoke customer service. And one of those services that we do offer to clients is finding the auction for the best auction for each individual piece, whether that is something that is found in Miami and will achieve the highest price for the most competition in Hong Kong. We can do that for your clients. Yes.
Do you auction anything and everything, personal property, or do you specialize in art or specialize in anything in particular?
Sure. Well, so we do have, we did hold auctions in about 60 specialty departments. And so some of them, as you can imagine, are quite niche. But yes, we do. I would say if you primarily Bonhams might be known for motor cars. We certainly have wonderful results in Asian art, jewelry. Those results for some of the results. We do have our flagship sales rooms are in Los Angeles, New York, London, and Hong Kong. And then of course we have Impressionist, modern, contemporary, post-war art sales as well. But some of the more niche departments might be, we have wine sales, coins, historic militaria, scientific instruments.
And she also heads the appraisal education for ISA.
Hi everybody, it's great to see you. It's great to be here and not where it's in Texas where it's raining cats and dogs. So my name is Meredith Molly and I am the Vice President of Heritage Auctions and I'm the Director of Appraisal Services. So what does that mean? That means I have two jobs at Heritage. That means I write all the formal appraisals that our company does, but I'm also here as your guide to know how does Heritage work, because it's a very big company. And I know we kind of talked about local versus national versus international auction houses today. I don't believe in that anymore. With the internet, all of us are international. All of my clients come from 173 countries. We have offices in Hong Kong, London, Paris, New York, San Francisco, Palm Beach, Chicago, and everywhere else. So I don't believe that anymore. I think the auction business has changed so much within the last 20 years that we're all really global places. And we all find that niche. And people find that niche, whether it's a Warhol in Palm Beach or here in Fort Lauderdale, or whether it's coins or it's the silver piece or whatever. People have Google alerts, and so they find you. So that's what I do at Heritage, is I help you navigate who to know. Because from my background at Christie's, my background at Heritage, my background at ISA, and I'm on Antiques Roadshow for about 11 years now, if I don't know it, I know somebody who does. So it's Ask Meredith list, because I don't know what this is. And I get 120 emails a day that says, I don't know what this is, can you help me? And I say, absolutely, sure, no problem. So that's no problem, happy to help, anytime. So I know what you know as appraisers, because I teach you. And then I also know what your clients want to know as appraisers. What does Heritage do? We sell cool stuff. Okay, we sell comic books, we sell sports memorabilia, we sell art and jewelry and coins and gold coins and wine and houses and, has anybody heard of Neil Armstrong? Yeah, that collection's coming this fall to Heritage too. So, we sell cool stuff.
Yeah, right.
And I'll take questions later.
Thank you. And I'm introduce you Chris is our local auction, representing local auctions, and he is someone that I've worked with regularly, because some of you might know his parents. They own a high-end, wonderful antique shop, and then the auction business he's going to tell you about.
Thank you guys for having me. Thank you, Sharon. I'm owner of Abington Auction Gallery. We've been in business about 7 years now. We do not sell everything, but we try and sell as much as possible. I always say we sell as many things as we could put in boxes. So we try and stay away from a lot of furniture, but we do sell it if it works. We are a small auction house. We sell on the internet, so it gives us worldwide exposure. Today, being in South Florida, having something so small, we get people all over the world looking at it. Most of our sales are out of the state of Florida. Primarily, 90% of the things we sell are actually out of the state, 20% internationally. How we work is we work obviously on commission basis. This gentleman asked if there's a charge for buybacks. We kind of work uniquely where we do a flat rate commission. It includes pickup, photographing, cataloging, everything. We do not charge buybacks. If I don't think I could sell it and we put a high reserve on something, I will not take it. It's a waste of both of our times, and I do not want to give something back where I have to charge you and then it doesn't end well. So basically our commission structure is flat rate, includes everything. If something sells for $1,000, we charge 10%. We do not nickel and dime somebody. You get a $900 check. We sell on 3 international platforms: Live Auctioneers, Invaluable, and Big Square. So our audience is all over the world. So being the local auction house, we do get exposure from everywhere. For instance, we had 4 Warhol screen prints back in March. Our Bighorn Ram sold for $72,000. In October, Sotheby's had one that sold for $68,000. It just shows you it does help on some things where you put things, but we could sell things that on the higher end as well. So thank you guys again for having me, and we look forward to answering some questions.
I think that gives you a good feel for what we have available as appraisers, real estate, machine equipment, personal property. You're all going to come across. It might be your neighbor, it might be a family member, or it might be a client that just says, the house, you're appraising the house because it's selling, and what do I got to do with all this stuff? So, I hope that you all will collect cards, get relationships built. I'd like to ask, is there any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, Sharon, you mentioned Sharon, you mentioned about some of these auction houses ask you, well, who is the owner? Why would they want to know who the owner is? I thought they'd be more interested in the product.
Well, they need to know the owner because they're selling, that's the consignor. We're just a go-between, but they always know who the owner is because they're dealing with the attorneys or the owners of the estate, not with us after the introduction usually. It's the fact that we like to, sometimes the family doesn't want everybody knowing that, you know, the collection of Antilles is going to be sold at auction. So it's just something that I've come across enough times that, you know, it has to be considered. Like I said, one of the 5 auction companies didn't even get a chance to look at the pictures or anything because they wouldn't deal without talking to the attorney and having the name. And the attorney just said, we told you to, you know, filter everybody, to do this, and, you know, that's how it was.
So from my point of view it goes back to provenance. And so are we talking Joe Blow's collection or are we talking Neil Armstrong's collection? And how I present my proposal to you to give to your client, I need to know all the information. I need to know the dimensions. I need to know where they were buying, when they were buying. I need to know about them so I can create a proposal so we can all create the proposal for you of what our company can do for you. So if you're holding back information from me, then I may not be able to give you my best proposal because I'm missing key pieces of information. So I want to work with you, I respect confidentiality, I understand, but as much information as you possibly can give you, help me help you.
And who pays for these catalogs? If it's a single owner catalog, that's very expensive.
It's negotiable.
Good. This is what I want you to ask, because you need to ask each of these people, how do you work with appraisals? How does the catalog get paid for, etc.? Good question.
Not that I have all the questions.
My question is for Michelle. Meredith, sorry, okay. Sorry, I get that wrong a bit.
That's right.
I've always been interested in, as an ad valorem appraiser, I have no idea of what you all really do. But when I watch the Antique Roadshow or the road shows, I am amazed how they cut across and the guy's got everything in his hip. He knows everything about this piece. And it's like, how do they do that in, 35 seconds? And so I'm curious to just, can you share with us how that all works and how those people are found when they are found and how those people that have those items actually get purchased?
Good question. Everybody's always interested in the Antique Roadshow.
All right, I'll give you my 2-minute roadshow skill. Number 1, highly edited. The hours of research is edited to 35 seconds. I'm sitting at a table with 2 other glass specialists and we've all conferred and come up with the right value to give to the show. So that's edited. It makes me look pretty, okay? It makes me sound really smart. Okay, so it comes in, there are 2 things that we're looking for. 1, what do you have? I don't know. Okay.
That's a party next door.
Oh, the party next door. Okay. So number 1, you have to own it, because if you don't own it, we can't film it. Lawyers, lawyers out there. And then also, you can't know more about it than I do, because that's not good television. So we're looking for something that, A, you don't know anything about and you own it. Okay? And it could be a $10 object, it could be a $500 object, it could be a $500,000 object. We're looking for anything that has a good story to tell. We see about 3,000 to 4,000 people in one day. We've gone from 7 a.m. until the last person is seen. We're hyped up on chocolate and caffeine all day. It's great. Love it. It's so much fun. It's a really great time. So, but it's all not scripted. So the first time you see what's on film is the first time that the client has heard. Now, I've heard their story about twice now, but it's the first time that they're hearing what I have to say. So that's the reality of it. But I've been practicing that, and I've been coached with my other colleagues about what we're going to say and how we're going to present it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Very good. Yeah, I think most of us watch the Antique Roadshow. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I recognize her.
More questions? Come on. Yes. Joy.
I'm curious, I don't know if anyone knows the answer to this one. It's the Trump tariffs on Chinese art, how it's going to affect the auction business. It was recently on CNBC last night, and they had all the,
Chinese art, Trump tower.
they had
Chinese
tariffs,
tariffs on
tariffs,
Chinese art.
and how it will affect the auction business if the auction business pays the tariffs or the Chinese pay the tariffs.
The answer to that, I think, is still in flux.
I think so.
I got an email the other day, a company internally alerting us that this is probably coming and more information will be coming soon on how to do that. But just be careful if anybody has any current consignments working if Chinese are coming in there, we're working on that. The other thing is the Wayfair decision with sales tax. That's all in limbo right now of how the states are going to be collecting sales tax and what we're going to do right now. So I think that we need another 6 months to figure out how that's going to work out.
Well, I heard the Chinese are buying like crazy right now to avoid it, because they know it's coming. Well, thank you so much.
But the trick is, are they paying? They're buying, but,
Yeah.
there's a 50-50 chance you won't get paid if you're an auction company and you sell to China. Right? Is that about right?
It's a little higher than that, but sure.
You can sell to
They're-
Venezuela too.
Yeah.
Were any of you at the car show a couple of weeks ago in I think it was in Palm Beach?
Pebble. Were you at Pebble? Is it quite
What was it about? Who was sponsoring it?
I'm not sure, other than it was all antique automobiles.
Are you talking about Pebble Beach?
No,
The
he's
Pebble
talking
Beach
about
one?
Palm Beach.
Okay.
I didn't hear about it.
Because there was a Duesenberg that sold for $22 million.
Did you see the Duesenberg in the I know, but
One of two in the world. Can't even hear the question. It was owned by Kerwick.
now see, that's provenance. That's what we're talking about. Something that's worth putting in a lot of pictures, getting a lot of articles written, and then it came from a named person. So, if it was John Brown, your next door neighbor, it wouldn't have mattered as much. So that's a good question. But no, sometimes the auction companies do show cars and things before, but that was so. And I'm going to hand the mic to our newest ISA National Board member, Tara Finley. We have Monica Fidel, who's on the board, and it just got announced today. So,
One more year.
It's not a question, but it's actually a shout out. A few months ago, I had a single owner collection out of Miami, and the owners decided to present it to a New York auction house and to see if Merida's Heritage Auction would be interested. As it turned out, I must say that the presentation that was done by Heritage Auctions to procure the collection was absolutely amazing. It came in a bound book. The amount of detail that they went into to do the proposal was extraordinary. So I've been in the auction business for over 30 years, and I was really impressed.
thank you. That's very nice. Okay. Do we have more questions? How about if something gets damaged? What happens? How does your auction company handle the piece that gets damaged before it's sold?
Gosh, well, we all will have insurance. So Bonhams actually is self-insuring, so it's a damage and loss, and the client will be paid out.
But they're the ones that decide. Is there a formula, like no estimate?
It is, yeah. It's actually the mid.
That's pretty standard, is we pay out at the midpoint of the estimate. So of course, we knock on wood, don't want anything to get damaged, but sometimes it does happen. Sometimes it can be repaired and then fixed and put back in the auction and it's fine. Was it an old brake that just came loose that just needs to be put back together, or is it something new, or is it a total loss? So that's when having an appraisals department that they can call and say, hey Meredith, as an appraiser, what would you say about this? I can help them out and navigate that. I can't do the appraisals conflict of interest, but I can at least advise them on that or what to do. But yeah, we can.
Typically, we don't handle the value that the larger auction houses do. knock on wood, we haven't had this problem, but in most cases, if it's beyond repair, it'd probably be something that would either go to insurance, which we're covered, or come out of our pocket, my pocket, because it's probably cheaper than filing a claim. On a, and it's as lower value than probably something they're handling.
Okay. Another question? Short question.
I never have short questions. No, I would like to ask each one of our panelists how they got started in this business and how many years of so just give us a little, you know.
Well, I came out of college in 2010, and it wasn't an easy time to get a job. So my dad's been in the business his whole life. So one day I had a terrible sales job, which I wasn't any good at, and he said, "Come work for me." So in 2010, I started working for him.
In between, what did you do?
In between,
You traded with me?
oh, Sharon did train me. But yeah, so came out of school, worked for him for a few years, and this started up in Auction Gallery soon after.
Gosh, I've been in this business 18 years now. So my bachelor's degree is in classical studies and art history. My master's degree is from Christie's Education, so it's a master's in connoisseurship in the history of the art market. I worked in the Christie's Antiquities department for 6 years, and I've been at Heritage for a little over 11 years now. And so I have background everything from ancient art to modern contemporary art. And I got into this business because my dad told me that looking for antiques was like going on a treasure hunt. And so he made it into a game and it became a fun time. And I'm still looking for my buried treasure.
So I was actually telling someone earlier this meeting, have been interested in art and antiques ever since I was a small child. In 5th grade, I announced that I wanted to become a curator because I wanted to be the person in the museum that got to touch everything. I have a bachelor's degree in art history. I did graduate work in decorative arts and then went on to get a graduate gemologist degree. I have been working, started off working for a Boston auction house in 1993 and have worked for auction houses. I have worked for a very high-end antique and estate jewelry dealer to the trade. I have worked also as an independent appraiser before rejoining the same New England auction house to open their office in Miami in 2013. So I really sort of bring a unique perspective of having worked in just about every aspect of looking at objects.
See, now you know a little bit more about them. You'll feel like you're approachable. Get their cards. Yes, Holly.
We all know, at least we did last year, we could have changed that, in the state of Florida, we're allowed to sell ivory in the state of Florida.
Really?
What about the auction houses? Are you allowed to sell it outside the state of Florida?
The question was, if you have ivory and you sell it, it stays within the state of Florida. Right now, they've tried for many years to get laws passed about ivory, and they haven't passed it in Florida. So you can still sell ivory, but once it goes across the state line, it's a problem. How do the auction companies handle this?
So funds won't sell ivory. We operate in New York and California that have laws that are that have passed laws that are actually much stricter than the federal laws.
So it is legal to sell ivory in Texas. Unfortunately, our bidding platforms, because we're so international, even though we can say only a Texas buyer can bid on this, you can only do this, you can't anybody else, it never fails. Somebody else from outside the state is going to bid on it, then they can't ship it, and then we cancel the sale. So 8 months down the road, you have an unhappy client with an unhappy piece in this. So that's the reason why we're like, no. Now that said, you have like on silver teapots, you have like the little insulators that are ivory. So those can kind of slip by on certain things and different things. So there's certain specific cases that we'll look at it. But for the most part, no, because it's just not worth the hassle.
And being local and legal to sell in Florida, we still do not touch it. It's more headache than it's worth. All it takes is one person to call Fish and Wildlife, and it's more of a headache than it's worth. But there are local auction houses that will sell it. I do know that.
Thank you. Great answers. More questions? Monica, you could project, right?
Yeah, I'm Monica Fidel, MGF Appraisal. I just want to say, in terms of transparency, working with auction houses, it's important to me that the client know that I am not going to double dip, because, you know, I am not going to request that the client pay me for my time to deal with the auction houses, because I will be getting a finder's fee. For me, that has become very important, because the transparency issue for me, you know, then the client knows that I'm not gonna get, again, you know, a payment from them, and also a finder's fee from the auction house.
That's a good point. Transparency is very important. That's why the emails are important. Also, you mentioned something like that. I don't, for some reason, I don't deal with the auction companies until the appraisal's over, it's paid for, that's done, and I don't charge any additional for, you know, if they say, oh, can you give us some contacts, if you could recommend some auction houses. That's when I do the emails, but I'm not getting paid by the client, I'm not getting paid by the auction company at that point. If a transaction happens and it sells down the road, at that point, I might get a $5 check or something. So, but yeah, that's a good point. Transparency for the ethics is very important. And like I said, I use the 5 auction houses as an example because I would have been making much more money if I had any of the others, but the lowest one, 2% of the hammer price, you know, that's what was best for the client. And I wasn't paid for any of the time that I spent, and it was a lot, probably 100 hours, helping with organizing, you know, the information back and forth for the catalog, etc. But the commission paid for that. So, Phil?
Yeah, do you find that that overall that in the auction house most everything either rises up or goes down or remains stable, or do you find that, let's say, artwork will be let's say it's going up, yet silver will be going down in demand and therefore prices?
Yes, Phil. Everything goes up and other things come down, and it stays the same.
Right.
What's the question? You
Well,
think
the question
is it individual areas?
Do you find that overall, that in general, that they all rise up, or do they fluctuate widely?
Okay, all together.
No.
No. It's a very, right now, people seem to want to buy expensive purses at Heritage. I mean, I can't believe this.
He's got an auction next week.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah. See, if you want to learn about very expensive parts, Chris has an all handbag. We don't call it purses. That's an old lady thing. Handbag with important names on it. Those are things that we as personal property appraisers see all the time. Yeah, Joy, how many did we see last weekend? A dozen, 12, 15? You know, thousands of dollars each, probably 20 pieces. Joy's one of my experts that comes on site with me sometimes, and I don't even carry a purse. I'm not really good at, I can tell the obvious fakes, but I can't tell a good copy from the real thing. So I depend on other people who are experts in that type of thing. So, I mean, who would think 10 years ago that handbags would be, the astronaut stuff, you know, seems to be hot, but I don't know how long that'll last. What else? What's the hottest thing that, you know, you find right now?
20th century art.
20th century. Okay.
So next year is the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and then also there's going to be a Neil Armstrong movie this fall, so the family decided to capitalize that this is probably a good time to sell the collection before everybody who knows who Neil Armstrong is dies. So as you ask my little sisters, you know, the millennials, who's Neil Armstrong? They're like, I don't know. No clue. What's hot right now? Comic books, comic art, sports memorabilia. Last year, Heritage sold over $50 million in sports memorabilia and $40 million in comic books and comic art.
Wow. Never would have guessed that.
Jewelry is still very hot. The jewelry market, colored stones. It has been for the past few years. Large diamonds, signed pieces are still, the trend is continuing upwards, for sure.
Do any of you deal with antique rifles?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
How are you finding that market right now?
Mixed.
Mix, you know, good, rare, like anything else, good, rare stuff is doing really well, generic, common stuff, not so well. But we're in Texas, we like our guns.
Pretty well shot up, Larry.
Okay, I know you're getting your dinner and enjoying your dinners and all. Any more questions? Okay, we got a couple more back over here. And then don't forget, you'll have time, come up and talk to people, get information. Okay, who's got a question? Yes. Well, people can't see.
No, okay. So I actually wrote this down. So as an expert and not as an appraiser, but an aspiring appraiser, I'm also looking to pen some identification guides and price guides. I work in antique scientific instruments, early communication equipment. Am I shooting myself in the foot by wanting to do this, but yet also aspiring to be an appraiser? And also, second to that, as representatives of the auction world, to what extent are printed matter identification guides and price guides still used by auction houses, or are they still valid, or are they considered obsolete?
Very good question. When I first started 40 years ago, we depended on those price guides and all the different things, including ammo. So let's hear what the experts say.
The experts. So being probably the oldest on the panel, I can tell you that I still love paper. I do a tremendous amount of research online, which has certainly changed since, from when I started, but I still love books and paper. We all produce hundreds of auction catalogs a year. Those are a wonderful resource. Price guides, so Bonhams lists all of their prices realized from every auction online. A lot of that, most auction houses are quite transparent with their prices realized. And so that information is readily available online.
I would say that that's very true from a fine and decorative arts perspective. Talking about heritage and the collectibles perspective, I still love my other street comic book price guide. Now, is it more retail, not fair market value? You have to know in the right situation where it can be used. Also, your Beckett guides and your certain things for sports. There's also some guidebooks that are just fine and work just well. You just have to remember what is the value that you're seeking, and making sure that you're searching in the right market for that, and also are you using the most up-to-date one. But also there's some collectibles guidebooks are still used fairly regularly throughout the hobby. But fine and decorative arts, no, we go right to the internet and to the auction records for real lifetime updates.
You agree?
I agree. Yeah.
I think Chris is getting tired of this.
No.
You didn't tell me I'd have to be up here this long. I told him 5 minutes. I tricked him into coming. I think at this point we're going to close this part of the meeting. I thank you all for coming and supporting your chapters, and thank you guys particularly for coming, especially the longest distance. Now let's give them a hand.